Imagine you are trying to tell this really thrilling, high-stakes story to a group of your friends.
Right, you're setting the scene.
Exactly. You're setting the scene, you're introducing the villain, you're describing the weapon, the location, the exact time of day.
But there's a catch, right?
A huge catch. You are absolutely forbidden, under any circumstances, from revealing the action. So no punchline, no explosion, no verb until your very last breath.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, you have to hold the entire room in this state of suspended animation, just stacking detail upon detail until you finally drop the one word that makes the whole story make sense.
That sounds exhausting.
It does. But welcome to another deep dive. Today, we are tearing up the floorboards of the German language, and, well, that exact kind of suspense is just the beginning of what we're going to find.
It really is a profound shift in how you process the world.
Yeah.
Because, you know, when most of us think about learning a new language, we treat it like a simple toolkit.
Right, like you're just swapping out the words.
Exactly. We assume the foundational map of reality stays exactly the same, and we are just swapping out the labels. An apple is an apple, a car is a car. You just attach a new sound to it.
Just memorizing a dictionary.
Pretty much. But what we are looking at today proves that language is not just a collection of interchangeable labels. I mean, it is an actual architectural framework.
Yes, and the stack of research and notes we're unpacking today is so fascinating because of how it was originally compiled.
It's a very specific use case.
Very specific. We aren't just looking at a grammar textbook. These notes were gathered to capture a highly specific personality profile, like a psychological vibe for someone named Devin.
Devin, right?
Yeah, Devin. And Devin is described in this profile as deeply disciplined, layered, morally serious, and incredibly fond of structure.
So they needed a language that matches that energy.
Exactly. So our mission today, for you listening, is to look at German not as a list of vocabulary words, but as a piece of machinery that actually orders reality. We want to see how this language operates as the perfect psychological operating system for a mind that demands structure and precision.
And to do that properly, we have to immediately discard the surface-level stereotypes.
Right, because people always jump to the same conclusions.
They really do.
Mhm.
If you ask a casual observer, they will likely tell you that German is just harsh or efficient, as if it's solely a language designed for barking orders or, I don't know, engineering cars.
Which is just so reductive.
It's tourist-level nonsense. The true magic of German, and the reason it aligns so perfectly with this morally serious, structured Devon persona, is how it balances technical exactness with this profound philosophical gravity.
It's the difference between a blunt instrument and like a highly calibrated scalpel.
That's a great way to put it.
Which brings us right into the nerve center of the language. Let's talk about the syntactic suspense.
The grammar rules?
Yeah, how does German actually structure a thought? Because based on the breakdown here, speaking German requires a completely different kind of mental gymnastics than speaking English.
It does. The underlying architecture of a German sentence operates on a principle we might call disciplined flexibility.
Disciplined flexibility, I like that.
Yeah, and the load-bearing foundation of that discipline is its case system. German utilizes 4 distinct cases. You have the nominative, the accusative, the dative, and the genitive.
Okay, let's unpack this for those of us who haven't sat in a grammar class in a decade.
Yeah.
What does having 4 cases actually do to the mechanics of a sentence? Because if I'm speaking English, I just put the words in order, right? The dog bites the man.
Right.
If I flip it to the man bites the dog, the entire reality of the sentence changes. Sequence is literally everything.
Sequence is the dictator of English grammar. But German approaches this completely differently. German uses the case system to explicitly mark the relationships between words, regardless of where they sit in the sentence.
Wait, regardless of where they sit.
Yes. It does this by slightly altering the articles, so the words for the, or a, and sometimes the endings of the nouns themselves. So the case acts as a visible tag.
Okay.
It tells you exactly who is doing the acting, who is being directly acted upon, who is indirectly receiving the action, and whose property is involved.
So the words actually carry their own job descriptions with them.
Exactly.
Can we demonstrate that? How does that actually sound in practice?
Let's use your example. The dog bites the man. In German, the dog is the subject doing the action. That's the nominative case.
The actor.
Right. The word for the is der, so der Hund.
Der Hund, got it.
The man is receiving the bite. He is the direct object. That is the accusative case. The word for the shifts from der to den, so den man.
Okay, so den man.
Right. The standard sentence is der Hund beißt den Mann.
Makes sense so far. Dog bites man.
But here's where the discipline flexibility kicks in. Because the words carry those physical tags, dir, for the subject, did for the object, you can scramble the sequence without changing the core meaning.
No way. So you can just move them around.
Yes, you can say, den Mann beißt der Hund. Literally, the man bites the dog.
But it doesn't mean the man is biting the dog.
No, because the man is tagged with den, any German speaker instantly knows the man is the one being bitten, even though he appears first in the sentence.
That is wild. Why would you put the man first then?
You are highlighting the man, perhaps to emphasize that it was the man who got bitten, not the child. But the mechanical truth of the action remains locked in place by the grammar.
It's like you are assigning different colored jerseys to the words before they run out onto the field.
That's a perfect analogy.
It doesn't matter where the players stand. You know exactly what team they're on. But if the nouns have this incredible freedom to move around, there has to be a catch.
There always is.
Right. There has to be something anchoring the whole structure, right?
There is, and it is incredibly rigid. This is the defining feature of German syntax. In a standard main clause, German operates on a strict verb-second rule.
Verb-second?
Yeah. The finite verb, the action that anchors the sentence, must almost always lock into the second structural position.
Even if the subject isn't the first thing in the sentence.
Precisely. If you decide to start your sentence with the time of day to add emphasis, the verb still rigidly demands the second slot, and the subject is forced to move out of the way.
Oh, wow.
So in English, you would say, tomorrow, I will go to the store. Time, subject, verb.
Yeah, that's normal.
In German, if you put tomorrow first, the verb snaps into slot 2. Morgen gehe ich. Tomorrow go I.
Tomorrow go I.
Yes, the sentence is built around the structural role of the verb, not around a permanent subject-first template.
Okay, I can see how that requires a bit of mental rewiring. You have to
Right.
constantly ensure that verb hits its mark.
You do.
But where this gets truly psychological, where it absolutely blew my mind when I was reviewing the research, is what happens in subordinate clauses.
Yes. This is where we return to your opening scenario, the concept of holding the room in suspense.
The ultimate test of patience.
Exactly. In a subordinate clause, for example, when you say, I know that he is going home today, the finite verb is pushed all the way to the very end of the clause.
It's completely banished to the back of the line.
It is. You might have 10, 15, or 20 words of context, framing, prepositions, and qualifications. You are laying out the entire landscape of the thought, and the actual action word that tells you what is happening in that landscape does not arrive until the final breath.
Let's really visualize this because it's such a massive departure from English.
It really is.
If I'm speaking English, the engine of the sentence fires up immediately. I know that he bought the book yesterday because it was raining. Boom, bought.
The action is right there.
Right up front, and the rest of the sentence is just trailing details. But in German, you are making me wait. I have to say, I know that he, yesterday in the rain, the book bought. Like, it's just dangling there at the end.
What's fascinating here is the cognitive posture this demands from both the speaker and the listener. It creates a profound feeling of temporal suspension.
You really feel it just listening to the translation.
As a listener, you cannot simply process the words and discard them. You have to hold all the moving parts in your active working memory.
You're juggling.
Yes, you are tracking the subject, the object, the time, the location. And all of these elements are held in a state of syntactic tension. They are hovering in the air until that final verb clicks into place and the mechanism is complete.
It's like, well, if an English sentence is an action movie, you know, you get the explosions right away, the plot is revealed in the first 10 minutes, there is this constant forward momentum, then a German sentence is a psychological thriller.
Oh, absolutely.
Or better yet, imagine walking down a long, highly detailed corridor. You are gathering clues, you're observing the architecture, you're noting the paintings on the wall, but the final door that actually makes sense of the whole hallway only unlocks at the absolute end.
Taking that corridor analogy further, think about what it takes to actually build that hallway as a speaker.
Right, you have to construct it in real time.
You are essentially building a bridge while walking across it. You have to know exactly where you are going before you start speaking because you have to ensure that the verb you eventually drop at the end perfectly matches the grammatical cases you assigned to the nouns at the beginning.
That sounds incredibly difficult.
It trains the brain for patience. It enforces hierarchical thinking. You have to understand how all the suspended parts relate to one another before the action resolves them.
I have to push back on this a little, though.
Sure.
Think about the reality of a casual conversation. Think about how often we interrupt each other or talk over each other in a heated debate.
It happens all the time.
Does this mean German speakers are just constantly hovering on the edge of their seats, anticipating the end of everyone's sentences? Is it exhausting?
Well, it becomes second nature to a native speaker, of course, but it absolutely changes the conversational rhythm. It means that interruption is structurally much more difficult.
Because you literally don't know what they're saying yet?
Exactly. If you interrupt a complex sentence before the verb arrives, you literally do not know what the person is doing. They might be saying, I know that the book yesterday in the rain threw away, or read, or ate.
Or burned?
Right. You have to wait. And culturally, this means German is extremely comfortable with delayed resolution. It rewards long, deliberate, argumentative arcs.
So no rushing to the point.
It is not a language that rushes haphazardly to the conclusion. It deliberately and methodically builds toward it.
So if the grammar is the structural corridor holding everything in suspense, what are the actual building blocks?
The vocabulary.
Yeah, because the deeper we get into these notes, the more it becomes clear that it's not just the syntax that feels engineered. The vocabulary does too. It's like the language treats words as conceptual Lego bricks.
Treating words as conceptual Lego bricks is highly accurate, especially when you look at the visual architecture of the language on the page. Standard German standardizes the capitalization of all nouns. Every single one.
And we aren't just talking about proper nouns, right? Not just names, cities, and brands.
Yeah. Every noun. An apple, a table, a dog. But also freedom, consciousness, development, sorrow. If it functions as a thing in the sentence, it receives a capital letter.
I'm trying to picture what a dense philosophical text looks like printed out. It must be visually striking to read a page of German compared to a page of English.
It completely changes the texture of the written word. Visually, it highlights thingness.
Thingness.
Yes. In English, abstract concepts blend seamlessly into the lowercase flow of the sentence. But in German, when you capitalize an abstract concept like truth or eternity, it suddenly stands out on the page like a monument.
Oh, wow.
Abstract nouns become these dense capitalized structural blocks. The prose looks less like a flowing stream and more like a constructed skyline.
It gives ideas physical weight. It's treating a concept, an invisible idea, with the exact same solidity as a brick.
Precisely.
And speaking of bricks, we have to talk about the compounding. The famously, notoriously long German compound words. We've all seen the memes about words that are 30 letters long.
The memes exist for a reason, but the sheer length of the word isn't the actual point. The composition is the point.
What do you mean?
Where English politely spaces ideas apart with prepositions, we say the Department of Motor Vehicles, German bolts those ideas together into a single, unbroken conceptual unit.
Just one giant word.
Right. But it is vital to understand that a massive compound word is not just a long label. It acts as a miniature theory.
Wait, a miniature theory? How does a word act as a theory?
Because when you weld nouns together in German, you are taking a highly complex phenomenon and explicitly analyzing it into its function, its relation, and its domain.
So you're dissecting it.
Yes, you aren't just pointing at a thing. You are categorizing how that thing fits into the universe. Let's look at an extreme real-world example. A famous historical German law was called the Rindfleischkartierungsaufgabenübertragungsgesetz.
Okay, I'm going to need you to deconstruct that absolute behemoth of a word.
Let's break it down into its Lego bricks. Rindfleisch beef.
Beef, okay.
Etikettierungslabeling. Überwachungssupervision.
Beef labeling supervision.
Aufgabenduties. Übertragungsdelegation.
Gesetzlaw.
The Beef Labeling Supervision Duties Delegation Law.
It is 63 letters long.
That is insane. English would use a whole sentence of prepositions to explain that this is a law regarding the delegation of duties for the supervision of the labeling of beef.
Exactly. German simply engineers it into one massive, unassailable noun block. It treats a complex legal reality as an engineered whole.
That is staggering. It's not just a thing. It's a thing that has been rigorously processed, categorized, and filed by the mind before it even leaves the mouth.
It's very efficient.
And this exact instinct to bolt concepts together leads us to those famous, untranslatable words. These are the concepts that are so uniquely tailored that English speakers just throw their hands up and borrow the German word entirely.
We use a lot of them.
Let's look at a few of the classics from our research.
Schadenfreude.
Schadenfreude, a perfect example of compounding. Schaden means damage or harm. Freud means joy. Put them together. Pleasure derived from another person's misfortune.
We all feel it. It's a totally universal human experience. You see someone who aggressively cut you off in traffic, get pulled over by a cop 2 miles down the road, and you feel that little undeniable spike of joy.
Exactly.
But English requires me to tell you a whole story to explain that feeling. German just slaps a capitalized engineered noun on it.
And by doing so, German demonstrates a willingness to name a morally awkward, hidden emotional state with incredible bluntness. It compresses an uncomfortable psychological truth into one structural unit.
What about Fernweh? I was looking at this word, and it feels like a paradox.
Fernweh translates literally to far pain or far woe. It is a deep homesickness for far-off places.
So the opposite of homesickness.
Yes, it is the exact opposite of being homesick for where you belong. It is the aching longing to be out in the distant, unknown world.
Usually we think of homesickness as a pulling back to our origins, to where we started. But the way this language constructs this idea, mechanically combining far and pain, it implies you can profoundly miss a place you've never even visited.
Precisely. It reveals an understanding that desire itself can be geographically imaginative. And then consider a word like zeitgeist.
Zeit meaning time, and Geist meaning ghost or spirit. The spirit of the times.
Yes, turning the sprawling, chaotic mood of an entire historical era into a single, analyzable cultural force.
That's a powerful one.
And finally, there is Weltschmerz.
World pain, or world weariness.
But it's more specific than just being tired. It is specifically a sorrow caused by the acute mismatch between the reality of the world and your ideal hope for what the world should be.
Oh man, that is heavy.
It is. It elevates world weariness. It frames it not as an individual eccentricity or a fleeting bad mood, but as a recognizable, dignified existential condition.
Okay, reviewing all these words, Schadenfreude, Fernweh, Weltschmerz, it feels like German treats abstract emotions as solid objects you can pick up and examine.
It really does.
But here's the question that naturally arises. Do other cultures not feel these exact same things? Like, do English speakers not feel Weltschmerz? Or is it just that German grants them the dignity of a specific, categorized name?
The human emotional palate is entirely universal. Everyone feels the sting of Weltschmerz, or the guilt of Schadenfreude. The critical difference here is linguistic validation.
Linguistic validation.
By giving these complex emotional states a compact, heavily engineered name, German makes emotional reflection an analytical process. It treats the interior world as morally and philosophically serious territory.
So it's not a cold language.
Not at all. There is a misconception that German is a cold, emotionless language. It is actually highly passionate, but it prefers its emotion to have bones in it.
Bones in it. I love that.
It doesn't want you to just spill your vague feelings onto the floor. It wants you to shape them, to understand the precise structure of your own burden.
Emotion with bones in it. That perfectly encapsulates the Devon persona we are tracking.
Yes, the structured mind.
The notes continually highlight Devon's moral seriousness and restraint. So if we want to understand how German actually became this heavy conceptual fortress, this language of structural bones, we have to look back at the historical workshop where it was built.
Because languages don't just happen.
Right. They don't just drop out of the sky fully formed. They are forged under pressure.
They're deeply forged by history. German belongs to the West Germanic branch of the Indo-European language family, making it a close cousin to both English and Dutch.
Okay, cousins.
But a decisive turning point in its history, the moment it really started to put on that heavy phonetic armor we associate with it today, was an event known as the High German consonant shift.
Let's get into the mechanics of that. What exactly shifted? How did the actual sounds change?
Well, around the 4th to 8th centuries, certain softer consonants in the central and southern German-speaking territories began to harden and fracture.
What do you mean by High German, like upper class?
No, actually. The high in High German refers to the mountainous higher elevation geography of the South, like the Alps, not to social prestige.
Oh, literal elevation.
Yes. So during this shift, the softer P sounds transformed into sharper PF, or F sounds.
Okay, so that's why the English word apple corresponds to the German word Apfel.
Yes, exactly.
Or pepper becomes Pfeffer. I can literally feel my mouth having to work harder, having to bite down on the word.
It takes more physical effort. And the tate sounds shifted into sharp X or S sounds. So the English word water became Wasser. The word to became zwei.
Wasser, zwei, right.
This shift separated the southern High German varieties from the northern Low German varieties, which didn't undergo the shift, and from their cousins, English and Dutch.
So that's the split.
Yes, this historical phonetic event is a major reason why German often feels more acoustically firm or armored compared to the slippery, gliding, vowel-heavy sounds of modern English.
It literally grew sharper edges.
It did.
But beyond the phonetics, the political history in these notes is even more fascinating. Because Standard German wasn't created by a powerful king sitting in a capital city dictating how everyone in the realm should speak.
That is a crucial distinction. If you look at French, the standard language was highly centralized around the Parisian court and an absolute monarchy. It was dictated from the top down.
The king says this is French, so this is French.
Exactly. But German grew up in this sprawling, chaotic entity known as the Holy Roman Empire. And the Holy Roman Empire was not a cohesive nation. It was an incredibly fragmented patchwork of hundreds of independent duchies, free city-states, principalities, and ecclesiastical territories.
Just a mess of borders.
Total fragmentation. There was no single absolute political center, no single Paris, forcing everyone to adopt the same dialect.
Which raises a massive paradox. If there was no absolute king forcing a standard language upon the people, how did Standard German even happen?
A great question.
How did a language famous for its incredibly strict, unyielding rules emerge from a landscape of total political fragmentation?
It emerged through the slow, powerful forces of technology, religion, and scholarship. The pivotal figure here is Martin Luther.
The Reformation.
Yes. When Luther translated the Bible into German in the early 16th century, he faced a massive problem. He wanted his text to be read by as many people as possible across all these wildly different, fragmented dialect regions.
So if he wrote it in just his local dialect, nobody else would understand it.
Exactly. So he didn't just write in his own local dialect. He deliberately synthesized a written form of German, drawing heavily from the diplomatic language used by the Saxon chancelleries, creating a super-regional written standard that could be broadly understood.
So the standardized rules of the language were essentially born in a book, not decreed from a castle.
Yes, and Luther's timing was perfect because of the rise of the printing press. Print culture exploded, and this new standardized written German was disseminated rapidly.
It went viral, basically.
16th century viral, yes. It was stabilized by print, by growing bureaucracies, by early schooling, and by intense theological debates long before there was ever a unified German nation-state in the late 19th century.
That's centuries later.
Right. This specific origin gives Standard German a very unique intellectual aura. It feels like a language built collaboratively by writers, theologians, philosophers, and administrators, rather than one imposed by aristocrats.
But looking at this history, it completely dismantles a very persistent myth I've always heard about German.
The purity myth.
Yeah. There is this stereotype that German is this isolated, monolithic, pure block of steel that never changes and never lets anything else in.
The purity fantasy of the German language is exactly that, a total fantasy. It's important to remember that purity narratives about any language are usually just nationalist theater masquerading as linguistics.
Ooh, that's a sharp way to put it.
It's true. When you actually look under the hood, German is a bustling workshop full of borrowed tools.
Who are they borrowing from throughout all this history?
Almost everyone they encountered. Latin vocabulary entered deeply through the Catholic Church, the Romans, and centuries of classical scholarship.
Makes sense.
French vocabulary poured into the language during the 17th and 18th centuries through courtly prestige, fashion, and diplomacy. Words like bureau for office or facade.
French fashion.
Yes. Yiddish profoundly influenced everyday German through centuries of Jewish-German contact, giving standard German words like Miesel or Tacheles. Slavic languages bled in continuously through the eastern frontiers. And today, of course, English is being heavily absorbed through science, global commerce, and digital culture.
So the grammar, the syntax, the rules, that is the impenetrable fortress. But the actual vocabulary sitting inside the fortress was imported from all over the world.
Precisely. It doesn't just passively borrow words, though. It actively metabolizes them.
Metabolizes them.
Yes, it pulls foreign words into its strict grammatical machinery, capitalizes them, assigns them a gender, and forces them to obey its case system.
It makes them play by German rules.
Exactly. And this historical fragmentation we've been discussing, the patchwork of the Holy Roman Empire, it didn't just disappear. It created a deeply layered, complex language today. German is what linguists call a pluricentric language, which leads to some truly fascinating family dynamics, both within its own borders and with its closest linguistic relatives.
Let's map out this linguistic family tree.
Yeah.
Because German isn't just spoken within the borders of modern Germany, it's the sole official language in Austria and Liechtenstein. And it shares official status in Switzerland, Belgium, and Luxembourg.
It covers a lot of ground.
Yeah, but the research notes specifically highlight Switzerland as a wild, almost rebellious outlier in the family.
Switzerland is a striking case study in how language actually operates on the ground versus on paper. In the German-speaking parts of Switzerland, standard written German, often called High German, is used for official government documents, national news broadcasts, and formal literature.
Okay, standard stuff.
But the everyday spoken Swiss German varieties, the dialects people actually speak in their living rooms, in cafes, on the street, sit at a massive, sometimes incomprehensible distance from that formal written standard.
How massive of a distance are we talking about? If someone from Berlin flies into Zurich and tries to order a coffee or eavesdrop on a conversation, are they going to be lost?
They might severely struggle, yes. Swiss German dialects are not just standard German spoken with a cute local accent.
Oh, it's deeper than that.
Much deeper. They preserve their own distinct medieval phonology, their own unique syntax rules, and a vast repository of localized vocabulary. It functions almost like a parallel, everyday linguistic system.
Wow.
It feels much more compressed, highly localized, and intimately rooted in the specific valley or canton. It proves a fascinating point. Standard German is powerful enough to unify the public, intellectual, and written world, but the dialects prove that the private, everyday emotional world remains stubbornly regional.
Okay, so that's the internal family dynamic, the tension between the written standard and the spoken dialect. But what about the external cousins? The notes draw a brilliant comparison between German, English, and Dutch.
They all stem from the exact same West Germanic root.
Let's start with English. If, as we said earlier, German is a carefully constructed psychological thriller, what is English?
If we zoom out and connect this to the bigger picture, thinking and speaking in English often feels significantly faster, looser, and more improvisational.
Less rules.
Right. As we discussed with the case system, English relies almost entirely on sequence. Because it doesn't have the heavy, interlocking grammatical armor of cases and strict verb placements, it is brilliant at rapid ambiguity, incredible compression, and sliding effortlessly between formal and informal social registers with what the notes wonderfully describe as a predatory ease.
Predatory ease, that sounds almost dangerous.
It means it's incredibly agile.
So if English sounds like a jazz improvisation agile, darting around, making up the rules on the fly, relying on the immediate context, then German sounds like chamber architecture.
Yes.
You have to commit to the structural blueprint incredibly early, and you have to bear the load of that structure all the way to the end of the sentence. But what about Dutch? The notes specifically highlight Dutch as German's closest sibling.
They are very close siblings. You could look at the core everyday vocabulary and see the family resemblance instantly. Wasser in German is water in Dutch.
Okay.
Haus ist Haus, which is book. But as anyone with siblings knows, two people can share the exact same parents and grow up to have entirely different, even opposing worldviews.
It's like one sibling grows up to be a strict civil engineer, and the other grows up to be a pragmatic merchant sailing the globe.
That is a very apt historical parallel. Linguistically, the deepest structural difference is that modern Dutch radically simplified.
Simplified how?
Historically, older forms of Dutch had complex case markings and genders, much like German. But over the centuries, Dutch mostly shed those complex inflectional endings in everyday use. It relies much more heavily on word order now, bringing its mechanics much closer to English.
So Dutch essentially took off the heavy grammatical armor.
It did. And by dropping that armor, the entire mental atmosphere of the language shifted. Dutch feels lighter, flatter, and more streamlined. It feels incredibly pragmatic and socially egalitarian.
Unlike the chamber architecture.
Right. If speaking German is like building a heavily defended, imposing conceptual fortress, speaking Dutch is like building a highly functional, practical canal city. Dutch wants to get straight to the point without dressing the point up in heavy, formal cathedral stone.
Think about the last time you sent a frantic, high-stakes email to your boss.
Oh, that's a good example.
Imagine how the grammar you use dictates the tone of that interaction. In Dutch, the directness is famous. It's blunt, practical, and socially flattened. Here's the problem, let's fix it right now.
Very direct.
But in German, that directness is filtered through an institutional formality. The grammar itself enforces a social hierarchy, specifically through the difference between the pronouns du and sie.
Yes, the formal Sie and the informal intimate Du. English used to have this distinction with thou and you, but it completely lost it.
We just call everyone you now.
Exactly. German fiercely maintained it. It means that German social life has a built-in mandatory linguistic mechanism for controlling social distance, measuring respect, and acknowledging institutional hierarchy.
You can't avoid it.
You cannot just be casually, universally friendly with everyone you meet. The grammar absolutely forces you to evaluate and declare your exact social relationship to the person you are speaking to before you even finish your sentence.
Which means authority in German doesn't just sound like someone loudly yelling a command. It sounds like a system operating smoothly. It sounds like exact wording and procedural correctness.
Procedural correctness, exactly.
And this concept of constructed weight, this institutional formality, it doesn't just stay neatly confined in the grammar books. It completely dictates how German culture approaches everyday life, art, food, and even how people insult each other. Let's transition into the cultural feedback loop.
This is where it gets really fun.
If this grammatical armor forces you to be so precise in an office email, what happens when that same rigid machinery is applied to something highly emotional, like music? How does a strict language sing?
The cultural feedback loop is where you truly see the machinery of the language animating the soul of the people. Let's look at music, because German phonetics, those heavy stress patterns and firm consonants we got from the High German shift, make it an incredibly versatile, almost paradoxical instrument.
I always admittedly thought of German as sounding too aggressive for beautiful music, but the notes say it actually works perfectly for delicate, classical art songs like 19th century Lieder.
It works masterfully for classical Lieder because a German lyrical line can unfold like a rigorous philosophical argument and a ductily vulnerable emotional confession at the exact same time.
A philosophical argument and a confession.
Yes. The syntactic complexity we talked about, the suspended verbs, supports deep rhetorical weight. A singer can stretch a thought over a long musical phrase, holding the audience in suspense before resolving the emotion on the final note. It can whisper, and it can be intimately, devastatingly poetic.
But it can also hit hard.
Exactly. But to your earlier point, because it has those hard percussive edges, it is also uniquely suited for aggressive modern genres.
Right. The notes mention how perfectly German pairs with industrial metal, cabaret, and certain highly rhythmic forms of rap.
It strikes hard. Because of the sharp consonants and the dense compound words, it can sound militarily precise, sardonic, or totally mechanized. It doesn't glide fluidly over the beat like Spanish or French might. It operates with an engineered, rhythmic exactness that can be incredibly powerful.
Okay, pivoting from music to food. I absolutely love this section. Culinary naming in German. The research says food language is intensely concrete and method-based.
Yes, German food discourse is famously literal. It tends to tell you exactly, materially, what an item is built from and precisely how it belongs to a specific, localized place.
No flowery menus.
No. Breads are differentiated and categorized in obsessive structural detail based on flour type and baking method. Sausages aren't given flowery abstract names. They are named by exact regional preparation methods and ingredients.
It's just a list of facts.
The naming isn't decorative. It is functional. It reflects a culture that finds comfort in accurate classification. As the notes beautifully phrase it, food language is where the village survives the state. The hyperlocal dialects still rule the bakery and the butcher shop.
And what about humor? Because, let's face it, the global stereotype is that Germans have absolutely no sense of humor. But this research completely dismantles that idea.
That stereotype is just a rookie error made by outsiders who mistakenly equate a lack of flamboyance with a lack of wit. German humor absolutely exists, and it is brilliant. It just thrives on extreme dryness.
Dry humor.
Very dry. It loves deadpan logic, heavy understatement, and, perhaps most uniquely, bureaucratic parody.
Bureaucratic parody. That is such a specific and hilarious genre of comedy.
It is entirely unique to cultures that revere structure. The comedy often comes from taking a rigid procedural system so intensely, exhaustingly seriously that the hidden absurdity of the system finally becomes visible. It is over-precision weaponized for laughs.
Let's look at some of the everyday idioms because they perfectly capture this mindset. Tomaten auf den Augen haben. Literally to have tomatoes on one's eyes.
Right.
It means to be oblivious or to miss what is blatantly obvious. It's such a physical, concrete, almost slapstick image. Or, das ist nicht mein Bier. That's not my beer, meaning that's not my problem.
Notice how material and grounded they are. They are deeply bodily and situational. Even a famous phrase like Ich verstehe nur Bahnhof, which translates literally to I understand only train station, meaning I don't understand anything at all. It gives the abstract feeling of incomprehension, a physical, spatial reality.
A train station.
Yes, you are standing in a noisy, chaotic train station, unable to make sense of the announcements.
And this intense precision extends to insults, too. The notes explicitly state that German insults aren't flamboyant, they are surgical.
This brings us right back to the compound words. If you want to truly insult someone in German, you don't just throw a random, vulgar curse word at them like you're throwing a rock. You construct a miniature machine of contempt.
A machine of contempt.
You use a compound word to pinpoint exactly what specific kind of fool they are, and what precise domain of life, and with what behavioral precedent.
It's like, instead of just calling someone an idiot, you call them a glove-wearing shadow parker.
Exactly, Shattenparker, someone who parks in the shade because they're too soft to let their car get hot.
That is so specific.
A German insult feels less like a spontaneous outburst of anger and more like someone is filing a devastating, highly detailed, notarized report against your fundamental character.
I am simultaneously terrified and amazed. It perfectly aligns with everything we've learned about the grammar. It's about prioritizing precision over elegance. The machine is allowed to show its gears.
It doesn't hide them.
Which is exactly why this language is historically so incredibly fertile for complex theology, for rigorous classical scholarship, and for engineering. Taking all of this together, the suspended grammar, the historical workshop, the surgical humor, the art, what does it actually feel like inside the mind of someone navigating the system every single day? Let's run a mental world simulation.
This brings us to one of the oldest, most fiercely debated questions in linguistics. Does the language you speak actually determine the thought you're capable of having?
Does it? If I speak German, am I physically forced by my vocabulary to think like an engineer?
No. Strong linguistic determinism, the idea that language imprisons thought, has been largely debunked. You can express any human idea, from poetry to quantum physics, in any human language.
Okay, that's a relief.
But, and this is the crucial nuance that modern linguistics accepts, language nudges habits of attention. It lays down deep tracks in the mind, making certain ways of perceiving the world easier, more natural, and much more frequent.
So based on everything we've discussed, what specific habits of attention does German nudge its speakers toward?
It relentlessly nudges your attention toward structure, relation, and completion. Thinking in German trains you to assemble meaning with visible, load-bearing joins.
Because of the grammar.
Right. Because of the strict case system and those verb final rules and subordinate clauses, you are constantly subconsciously aware of exactly who acts, upon what, under what specific conditions, and with what degree of certainty. You are trained to expect precision in how roles are marked.
It forces you to clarify responsibility. You can't just vaguely wave your hands at a problem and use passive voice to hide who is at fault. You have to lock the pieces together. And the notes mention it handles time differently, too. Not just grammatical verb tense, but the actual concept of historical time.
Yes. Because German is so deeply comfortable with dense abstraction and creating new compound nouns, it handles historical concepts masterfully. Time isn't just viewed as a personal, linear chronology of things that happened. It is categorized into grand conceptual eras, cultural spirits, and philosophical systems.
That feels huge.
English often narrates time briskly, like a story moving from plot point to plot point. German theorizes time as a vast architecture.
Okay, so bringing this all the way back to our persona from the very beginning.
Devon,
the structured mind.
Devon values integrity, restraint, and moral seriousness. If I'm Devon, German is my absolutely perfect operating system. It rewards structure before release. It demands precision before flourish. But I have to ask the practical question here.
What's that? Does the constant, unyielding need to categorize, structure, and assign responsibility make it exhausting to just have simple small talk? If vagueness is structurally difficult, how do you just chat about the weather at a bus stop?
Small talk exists in Germany, Austria, and Switzerland, of course. People chat, people joke around, people are entirely casual with their friends.
They aren't robots.
Exactly. But the language undeniably shines its absolute brightest when it has a definite heavy job to do. When it needs to explain a theory, distinguish between two subtle concepts, systematize a chaotic process, evaluate a moral failing, or commit to a binding action.
The big stuff.
Yes. In German-speaking cultures, conversational vagueness isn't just seen as a quirky stylistic choice. It is very often perceived as a lack of intellectual rigor, or even a subtle moral failure. The culture heavily rewards saying exactly what you mean with clean, sharp edges, rather than coating your thoughts in a comforting, ambiguous syrup.
A confession written with a ruler. That is such a powerful phrase I found in the research notes, and it captures this perfectly. As we reach our final synthesis for this deep dive, I want to pull all these complex threads together. We set out today to see how the German language operates as a piece of machinery that orders reality.
And we found quite a machine.
And what we found is that it is not just a harsh-sounding utilitarian toolkit. It is a profound architectural language. It doesn't just passively describe the world. It actively, aggressively wants to know exactly how the world is joined together. It demands your patience. It demands that you carry the heavy weight of your sentence until the very end before you are allowed to put it down.
It does. It is a remarkably clean instrument for highly difficult minds. It allows the speaker to build a complex bridge while actively walking across it, securing every single beam and rivet of context before finally delivering the definitive action.
It's a structural marvel.
It manages to accommodate both the extreme, yearning emotional romanticism of poetry and the extreme, rigid intellectual system building of philosophy.
We've explored the X-ray of this language today, and the picture here is vast. It is a landscape of capitalized, abstract monuments, perfectly suspended verbs, and brilliant borrowed tools salvaged from the fragmented history of an empire.
And this detailed exploration leaves us with something crucial to consider about our own minds, regardless of what language we speak.
Definitely.
We've seen how German forces a speaker to patiently delay resolution, to assign precise structural responsibility, and to frame their deepest emotions with conceptual bones. Language is the invisible water we swim in every single day.
That's a great metaphor.
So as you go about your week, think about the language you speak natively. What invisible habits of attention is your native grammar secretly nudging you toward? Are you rushing rapidly to the action like an English action movie, bypassing the context? Or are you building a streamlined, practical canal city like the Dutch?
Or something entirely different.
And perhaps most importantly, what vital, untranslatable concepts is your own culture simply refusing to give a name to, leaving you to feel them in the dark without the dignity of a word?
Are we missing the vocabulary for our own reality? That is an incredible, provocative thought to sit with. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the magnificent machinery under the floorboards of the German language. Keep exploring the hidden architecture of the words you use every single day, and we'll see you next time.